let's focus on registering, right? When I register, well, one of the things I like to be able to do is maybe validate that the passwords are the same, that this username is not already taken, right? And if it's successful, I would register and I would add this new user object into our collection of already existing users, right? So let's play around with that. To do that, right now the register really goes to the profile page, but that really is not what we want. We would like to run some logic, right? We would like to handle this event, and the only place we know how to do that is the controller, right? That's the right place for listening for event handlers, right? Running some code, right? Running some business and delegating this to some business logic or some service, right? So let's do that. Let's create a controller for the register page, right? So let's go in the controller. We have the register page, which you're going to have to change the naming convention, right? To follow the correct naming convention. I'm going to copy the login controller, register, and in the register controller, let's make a couple of changes here. Right, let's replace this to be register. There it is. And there will be some register event handler, which we're going to be implementing. Now, remember that defining the event handlers like this makes it hard to read, right? And I would ask you in your assignment to make sure that instead of using this syntax, which is for me, coming from Java, is hard to read. I think this is so much easier to read that you declare your functions not anonymously, right? And declare all your event handlers at the top. Perhaps provide a label, event handlers, right? And down below, these are the implementation of the event handlers. Okay. So let's see. The implementation might be that we're going to be taking in a username and a password, perhaps two passwords, password 2, and we want to validate that the passwords are the same. Perhaps give an error message if something is wrong, and maybe say if password is not equal to password 2, then perhaps give some error message. Maybe something like model.error equal passwords must match. Okay, and return. And what else? We might want to check to see if the username is not already taken, right? And for that, we have a user service. We have a user service that I believe we implemented yesterday that can find a user by its username. Let's see, user service. I believe we implemented that yesterday, didn't we? Right, we talked about it yesterday, right? Find user by username. We pass in a username, and if we find it, we return the actual object. Yes? So we can just use that over here. We can say find, right? We say user, find user by username, and we can pass in the username, and we can ask if user is not null, right? Then we can add the user to the collection, right? And navigate to the profile of that particular user. Yes, but if it is not null, right? If it's not null, we can create another error message. Error. Username is not available. Yes, right? So let's see. Right. So if it's not null. No, wait a minute. Do I have it wrong? I want the error message if it is not null. Meaning if the user exists, right? If the user exists, I want the error message, right? If it does not exist, meaning it is null, we didn't find it, then we want to add the user to the collection. Correct? Right? So let's see. We're going to use again the user service, and we're going to add create user. and we're going to pass the user object. And I believe the user object has everything we need. It has a username, it has a password, presumably. Actually, let's see, find user by username. Actually, no, we only have username and password. So let's create the object. So var user, and we'll take the username, will be the username that we pass in as an argument, and the password will be the password that we have also as an argument. So we have a brand new user object, which we can then pass in. Okay? Maybe we should use different variable names here. Maybe found. Something like that. Yes? Yes.
So how does this work making a user object? When user objects in an array have those other fields.
Yep.
You have objects that have different characteristics in the same.
Yeah, so the schemas are somewhat different, right? This one only has a subset of the schema, only username and password, where some of those might have first name, last name, and whatnot, right? As we'll see when we get to MongoDB, having objects of different schema is perfectly fine. Where some of those other attributes would be null or undefined, right? To be defined later. So, for instance, in your profile, you can then update the user by adding first name, last name, and whatnot, right? So for now, it's okay that they're undefined, right? That which will be defined a little later. If this would be a SQL, in SQL, perhaps some of these fields might be considered not nullable, right? So you need a username and a password, but everything else could be null until the user decides to give us the additional information, right? Okay. But as we'll get to MongoDB, we'll see that having objects of different schema in the same collection is totally fine. Not that you would want to do that, not that it's good. Not that it's a good practice. But MongoDB, as we'll see, it allows you to modify the schema on the fly and doesn't really do any validation. And we'll see what the challenges are when we get to that. Yes?
From what I've seen and what I've seen on like co-op and stuff, my last co-op they used Mongo, but like it seemed to just be like a big mess. And there was like no real reason for them. Every time I hear about Mongo, it seems like it's just like the schemaless thing doesn't really help them. It just kind of like is there because they can't make it work.
Right. So usually one of the biggest problems of using MongoDB is to consider that it's a relational database, and it's not a relational database, right? It's an object store. You say I want to store this object, put it aside, and then be able to reconstitute that object at some point. Right? If you treat it as an object store, then it makes sense. Right? It's an instance, very much like in Java. You would stream an object, right, into a file and then reconstitute that same object at a later time, right?
Okay.
So if you consider it as an object store as opposed to a relational database, which is not, it was never meant to be a relational database, right? If you have in your database in your data schema lots and lots of relationships that you need to join, then MongoDB is not the way to go, right? But if you consider it as a storage of objects that you can then retrieve, certainly, right? And yes, we'll talk about all those things where to use and where not to use Mongo. All right, so we're going to store the object, and let's see, find user by name. I think we implemented that already. Right, it just iterates over the collection looking for a username, right? And if it finds it, it just returns that particular instance. Otherwise, it returns null. And whereas the create user, the implementation is to do what? Let's see, is to take that user object and just add one more attribute, the ID attribute, which is a timestamp, and then push it to the array. Yes? Okay. All right. So let's see. So we have a brand new controller. Let's include it in our index page. Is that our index page? No, I don't believe that's it. Maybe this is it. So let's add that brand new controller, and it's in the register. It's register, and we're gonna configure it. We're gonna say the register. Templates is going to have the following controller. It's the register controller, and this is a controller as model. Okay? All right, so let's see. Let's re-render. Let's see, no complaints from the console, so it looks like the controller did work. We can step through, and please practice stepping through your source code. Right, so you can see the controller that we just created under user controllers. There it is. Right, and you can put breakpoints and step through your code. So, for instance, when this template loads, it also loads the controller. Right, so if I re-render this, notice that we are indeed in that controller. It's declaring its the event handler, the function, and whatnot, and we can put a breakpoint in the event handler. So we can look at Bob and Bob. And try to put some different password. We can run register, and it didn't work. Why didn't it work? In where?
Right here. It should say controller S. You say controllers S.
Control register controller. Oh, that definitely. Okay. Thank you. That's one thing. Let's see what else. In the register, where are you? Is that a link? It is a link, right? So we don't want this to be a link, register, right? Again, make it easier to read. So we don't want this to be a link. Instead, we want to notify the controller, right? That we are trying to register, and we're passing the username and password. And that username and password is this right here, right? 2 passwords actually, password 2. And those are local variables that we're going to declare here. They're also going to be declared on the scope, but that's fine because we're ignoring the scope, right? We're not using the scope at all. So we're going to tie this to the username, a local variable username, right? That is also being declared on the scope, but again, we don't care about the scope, right? Password. So they are indeed considered treated as if they were local variables, right? They're nowhere else available but in this page, right? Unless I would do model that username, but it's not necessary, right? We prefer to control, right, the access of the data between these 2 artifacts by a well curated API. Yes. I don't want to increase. There's no need to increase its scope of this variable any more than what I need it for. Yes. Right, so I'm passing it through this API. Right. All right. So let's see. Do we have a placeholder for the error? We need a placeholder for the error. Let's see. We'll put here. Will be an alert, and let's see, alert and alert danger red if we have an error. So we can do model.error, right? And only show this if indeed we have a model error. If we have a normal message, maybe we don't use danger. Maybe we use like an info if we have just a plain old message. And only show it if there is indeed a message. Yes? Make sense? Everybody okay? All right. Let's see. Let's try this again. Let's see if we broke it. Okay, so we're in here. Let's go in there. I guess did I already click on it? Username is not available. Wait a minute. I didn't click on it, did I? Register. Why is register being invoked? Why is register being invoked? Oh, ng class. It's not ng class, it's ng click. Right? ng class, we'll see a little later, allows you to dynamically calculate what class you want to apply to an element, right? And it immediately invokes whatever you give it here. It tries to evaluate this to see, hey, what class do you want me to use? Right? And it could certainly be a function, and a function can calculate what class you want to add here. That's why model.register was being invoked. Yes? So be careful there. I think the other day I mistakenly I put here an ng click, which was supposed to be a delete user, okay, and I mistakenly put here an ng class, and it started deleting all my users because it was calling this model.delete user, right? So be careful, right? It actually invokes that function for calculating what the class should be. All right, so let's try this again. There we go. So we have that. All right, there we go. All right, so we have password. Let's try with some bogus passwords. We go in here. Let's see, password that we're passing as SGF and password 2 is different. So Indeed is going to go in here and change the password, the error message, and then notice it shows the password must match. Okay. How about let's try a user name that we know exists. Let's see. Passwords are still different. Okay, let's put here Bob, Bob, and Bob. So we can make it beyond that first error message. Let's see found. Let's see if found comes back with a user Bob Marley. So we did find that user by username. So it's not different than null. So it's going to go into the error message and it's going to say username is not available. Everybody okay? Right. If instead we try Dan, which I don't believe he's a user. Let's see. We can step through this. Found is undefined. Okay. So if it's not null, all right. So it's coming back as undefined. So it's coming back as undefined, and I believe because of the controller here. Actually, let's step through that too, right? Let's try that. Register. Oh, not that. That's not what I meant to do. Okay, let's step into the find by username, see what's wrong. Let's step in. So we're inside the find user by username, and we have the username Dan. And users, let's see, I don't believe we have Dan. We have Januzzi, Charlie, Bob, and Alice. Let's see if this returns. Put a breakpoint. We have a return here. That's why, right? It's going to return right away. Okay, so my second return null, it's never reached. Okay, let's fix that. Let's go back to the service, and this will be var user, and this will be, let's see what the user comes back as. Well, let's try it again. Let's try Dan, and Dan. Register. We have a breakpoint in the service. Oh, did we? I thought we did. Don't we have a breakpoint here? Okay, here. A breakpoint right here. I'm sorry? My passwords. Oh. Okay, we're in here. The username is Dan. Let's see. Let's continue. Let's see what the user is. Okay, it's undefined if it's not found. Okay. Yeah. So I'm sorry. Yeah. So let's return. Okay, we have a return already. No. Well, no. What this does is just returns whether true or false, right? Whether they're the same. And if it finds it, it returns the actual user, right? So we could say if not user, then return null, something like that. Let's see. I'm sorry. Oh, and then okay. Otherwise, else, then return user.
Is that a true statement or not?
Yeah. So we can check to see for undefined. The way you can check for undefined is, let's see. So type of user is undefined on. Type of user, I think it's equal to undefined on the find, then we return null. Otherwise, we just return user, something like that. Okay, let's see. Let's run that again. Let's try Dan, and Dan, and let's put a register. Let's go in here. Let's see. User is undefined. Okay, so it's a return null right there. Okay, so we go back, and I guess I should have stepped through this, right? Let's put in the controller what comes back here. Let's try it again. Register. Let's see. What is user? Okay, notice that user now exists, right? It exists because we had added it before, right? So now we're going to get the error of saying that the user is not available. All right, so if the user does come back, what we could do is just display him here as a message. We could do that. Let's see. Let's go to the controller, and we can say message or model.message. Message is equal to the brand new user we just created. All right, let's see. Let's try it again. Let's refresh. Notice that Dan, because I refreshed the page, that object that I had added to the array is gone, right? Because none of that information is being stored at the server or the database, right? The only place that it is at the context of the browser. So when we find here, user now is undefined, and it comes back, and there it is. That's the brand new user that we just added, right? We did notice the new ID that we added as a string. Okay. So what happens here is what we want to do is that once we have successfully added the user, we just want to navigate to the profile of that user. Okay, with the new ID that we just created. So to do that, we're going to use the same service that we used yesterday for being able to navigate using the location service. So after we create, okay, there's no need to display anything. We're just going to navigate away and go to where? We want to navigate to what was it? User, right? User, and then the ID of the user we just created. So user._ID. Let's try that. Let's try going Dan, register. We don't need these breakpoints anymore. And there it is. We navigated to Dan. Everybody okay? That makes sense? All right. So the update is more or less the same, right? We let's see. What do we have? The update. Maybe we could be a button here down below that does the update. But the update would do what? The update would go into the update user, right? Look up the user by ID. Once we have that user by ID, we would then update the attributes, first name, last name, email, or whatever attributes we want to update, correct? Right, so I'm going to leave that for you. All right, let's go on to the next page. All right, the next might be that we're going to navigate to the websites of that user. Okay, so let's work on that next.